Welcome to our grandma's diary. Please subscribe and let's dive in. They cornered me in a restaurant. My own blood. 6 of them against 1 of me. The papers were already drawn up. Sign this right now or you're dead to us, my aunt said, loud enough for the whole place to hear. I had 24 hours to give up everything my grandfather built. What they didn't know. I'd been recording every conversation for the past 3 weeks. And what I was about to unleash would expose secrets that went back 40 years. Stay until the end, because what happens in that courtroom isn't just justice, it's total annihilation. This is the true story of how my family tried to steal my inheritance, and how I made sure they'd never try it again. My name is Marcus Wright, and this story actually starts 20 years before my grandfather died. I was 12 years old the first summer I showed up at Dutch Wright's ranch in West Texas. My dad had just lost his job in Houston, money was tight, and my parents thought spending the summer with Grandpa Dutch would build character. I thought it was punishment. The ranch was 720 acres of dust, cattle, and hard work. Dutch was 68 then, built like a fence post, with hands that felt like leather when he shook mine. He didn't hug, didn't smile much, just looked at me and said, "You know how to work?" "I guess so," I mumbled. "Then let's find out." That first day, he had me mucking out stables at 5 a.m. By noon, my hands were blistered. By evening, I could barely lift my arms. I went to bed at 8 p.m. and woke up to him banging on my door at 4:45 the next morning. "Cows don't care if you're tired," he said. But here's the thing about Dutch, he worked harder than I did. At 68, he was fixing fences in 100-degree heat, hauling feed, driving posts. Never asked me to do anything he wouldn't do himself. And slowly, day by day, I got stronger. Tougher. I learned. By the end of that summer, I could ride a horse, mend a fence, spot a sick cow from 50 yards, and work a full day without complaining. Dutch drove me back to Houston in his old Ford, and at the end of the drive, he shook my hand. "You'll do," he said. That was the highest compliment I ever got from him. I came back every summer for the next 10 years. While my cousins were at summer camps and beach vacations, I was learning everything Dutch knew about ranching, livestock, and business. He taught me to read a profit-loss statement, showed me his investment portfolio, explained why he diversified into oil leases when cattle prices dropped in the 80s. "A ranch isn't romantic," he told me once. "It's a business. And if you can't think like a businessman, the land will eat you alive." Now, let me tell you about the rest of the family, because this is where things get complicated. Dutch had 3 kids, my dad Thomas, Uncle Pete, and Aunt Carol. My dad was the youngest and the gentlest. He worked in IT, liked reading, never cared much about the ranch. Dutch respected that. "Not everyone's cut out for this life," he'd say. They had a good relationship, quiet but solid. Uncle Pete was the middle child and the golden boy. Star football player in high school, business degree from Texas A&M, worked in commercial real estate. He was loud, confident, and always talking about his next big deal. Dutch was proud of him, but they'd had a falling out around 2008. Something about Pete asking for money to invest in a strip mall that went belly up. They'd patch things up eventually, but it was never quite the same. Then there was Aunt Carol, Dutch's only daughter and, according to family legend, his favorite when she was young. She'd married a doctor, lived in Dallas, drove expensive cars, and belonged to country clubs. But her husband, Rick, had a nasty gambling habit that burned through money faster than he made it. They divorced in 2015, and Carol had been struggling financially ever since, though she'd never admit it. Carol had 2 kids, Brandon and Jessica. Brandon was my age, and we'd been close as kids. He was smart, funny, entrepreneurial. But somewhere in his 20s, he'd gotten obsessed with looking successful. Always wearing designer clothes he couldn't afford, driving leased luxury cars, talking about his businesses that never quite materialized. Jessica was different. Quiet, kind, worked as a teacher. She's important to this story later. Uncle Pete had 1 kid, Troy, who'd moved to California and rarely came back. Troy wanted nothing to do with ranch drama, and honestly, good for him. Here's what I didn't know back then. While I was learning to work the ranch, the rest of the family was watching Dutch's empire grow and calculating their inheritance. Everything changed in 2018. Dutch had always leased some of his land to oil companies for exploration. It brought in a few $1,000s a year, nice supplemental income but nothing crazy. Then one day he called me. I was 26, working as an equipment manager for a construction company in Austin. "Marcus, they hit something," Dutch said. His voice was strange. Excited, maybe, but Dutch didn't do excited. "Hit what?" "Real. Not just traces. The geologist says there's a formation under the east pasture that could produce for 30 years. The new lease agreement was worth $40,000 a month, guaranteed, plus royalties on production. $500,000 a year, minimum. The ranch had just become worth serious money. Not just comfortable retirement money. Generational wealth money. Dutch did something smart then. He called a family meeting. Got everyone together, me, Dad, Pete, Carol, the cousins. We met at his ranch house and he laid it out plain. "The oil money changes things," he said. "This ranch is now worth approximately $5 million, plus livestock and equipment. I'm getting old. I'm going to start thinking seriously about my legacy." I watched everyone's faces carefully. Dad looked uncomfortable with the whole discussion. Pete was leaning forward, interested. Carol's eyes had this gleam I didn't recognize. "I haven't decided anything yet," Dutch continued. "But I want you all to know, I'm not splitting this ranch into pieces. It's been built over 60 years, and I'll be damned if I'll see it carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey. Someone will get the ranch. The others will be taken care of, but someone has to run this place." "Who are you thinking?" Pete asked immediately. Dutch looked at him. "When I decide, you'll know." That meeting ended awkwardly. In the parking lot afterward, I overheard Carol talking to Pete. "It should be split equally," she was saying. "That's only fair." "He won't do it," Pete replied. "You know, Dad, he thinks the ranch is sacred. Then we need to make sure it goes to someone who'll be reasonable about selling it." I pretended not to hear. But the seed was planted in my mind. They wanted to sell. From 2018 to 2021, I watched something ugly develop. Suddenly, family members who'd barely visited Dutch were showing up regularly. Pete came by twice a month, always bringing expensive whiskey, always talking about protecting the family legacy. Carol started inviting Dutch to Dallas, trying to involve him in her social circle. Brandon launched a consulting business and kept pitching Dutch on investment opportunities. But Dutch saw through it. He told me once, while we were checking fence lines, "They smell money, Marcus. Like buzzards circling." "Maybe they just want to reconnect," I suggested, though I didn't believe it. "You're young. You still think the best of people. That's good. Don't lose it. But don't be naive either." He started testing them in subtle ways. He'd call Pete and say he needed help moving cattle, and Pete would have an excuse. He'd ask Carol to come stay for a week when he had the flu, and she'd be too busy. He'd invite Brandon to learn the business side of ranching, and Brandon would show up once, take some Instagram photos, and never come back. Meanwhile, I was still showing up. Not because I wanted the inheritance, I didn't even know I was in consideration, but because Dutch was my grandfather, and the ranch was important to him. I'd drive out from Austin twice a month, help with whatever needed doing, and listen to him talk about the old days. In 2020, during COVID lockdown, I actually moved to the ranch for 6 months when my construction job went remote. Dutch was 84 and high risk. I wanted to make sure he was okay. Those 6 months changed everything. Living with Dutch full-time, I saw the ranch differently. It wasn't just cattle and land. It was a complex business operation. Dutch showed me everything. The oil lease contracts. The water rights agreements. The investment portfolio he'd built over 40 years. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all carefully balanced. He had $4.2 million in investments alone. "People think ranchers are simple," he told me one night over whiskey. "That's how we like it. Let them think we're just dumb cowboys while we're reading market reports and negotiating mineral rights." He taught me his system for everything. How he tracked cattle lineage to maintain herd quality. How he diversified into leasing pasture land when beef prices dropped. How he'd bought adjacent properties over the years, gradually building the 720 acres from the original 40. You know why I never split this place up? He asked me. Why? Because land is like a body. You can't cut off an arm and expect both pieces to survive. This ranch works as a whole. The water rights feed the pastures. The pastures feed the cattle. The cattle generate income. The oil leases provide stability. It's an ecosystem. Split it up and you kill it. He pulled out a map and showed me what would happen if the land was divided. If Carol gets the west portion, she has no water access. If Pete gets the east, he has no grazing land. If Thomas gets the north, he has no mineral rights. It would force them to sell. And some developer would buy it all, bulldoze it, and put in subdivisions. So what's the solution? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. The solution is someone has to get it all. Someone who understands what it is and won't destroy it. I didn't realize until later that he was telling me his decision. Here's something I didn't know. Dutch had been recording conversations. It started in 2019, after the oil discovery. He'd installed a voice-activated recording system in his home office, completely legal in Texas, by the way, which is a one-party consent state. He recorded every conversation about the ranch, the inheritance, the oil money. He never told anyone. He just collected evidence. After he died, his lawyer, Mr. Hendricks, told me about the recordings. There were hours of them. And they revealed everything. Carol on the phone with Brandon, once the old man dies, we sell immediately. I've already talked to a developer who's interested. We could get $8 million if we move fast, before the market shifts. Brandon, what about Marcus? Won't he object? Carol, Marcus is 28 and naive. We'll explain it's for the best, that he's not ready for the responsibility. If he fights us, we'll tie it up in court until he can't afford lawyers anymore. Pete in Dutch's office, thinking he was alone. Dad, I know you can't hear me, but I need you to understand. I've got debts. Serious debts. The strip mall wasn't my only mistake. I'm into some people for $300,000. I need this inheritance. So whatever you're planning, I'm going to fight it if it doesn't give me enough to get clear. Brandon visiting Dutch. Grandpa, I've been thinking. When the time comes, and I hope that's not for many years, but when it does, I think I should run the ranch. I've got business experience. I could really scale it up, maximize the returns. What Brandon didn't say, he'd already approached 3 developers about selling. The most damning recording was Carol talking to a lawyer a year before Dutch died. I need to know our options, she told the attorney. My father is 84. He's getting forgetful. If he makes a will that's not equitable, what are the grounds for contesting it? The lawyer's response, you'd need to prove incapacity or undue influence. That's a high bar. What about if someone had been spending a lot of time with him? Like isolating him from the family? That could potentially support an undue influence claim, but you'd need evidence. Dutch had heard enough. He got the cognitive evaluation the next week. Scored perfectly. Made sure it was documented, dated, and notarized. Dutch's last year was hard. He was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in January 2023. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 11, through sheer stubbornness. I moved back to the ranch to help. Took a leave of absence from my job. Dad came every weekend. Pete and Carol visited occasionally, but it was clear they were uncomfortable around the illness. Death made them squeamish. Dutch stayed sharp until almost the end. In August, about a month before he died, he called Mr. Hendricks to his bedside. I'm ready to finalize everything, he said. They spent 3 days going over the will, every detail. Dutch was meticulous. He left specific explanations for every decision. He arranged for the cognitive evaluation to be reviewed again. He made sure everything was airtight. Then he called me into his room alone. Marcus, I'm giving you the ranch. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. Let me finish. I'm not giving it to you because you're my favorite. I'm giving it to you because you're the only one who won't destroy it. Your father doesn't want it, he's got his own life, and I respect that. Pete and Carol want to sell it and split the money. You love this place. I've watched you. You know every acre. You care about it. But the family. The family will be furious, he said flatly. They'll feel cheated even though they're each getting over $500,000. They'll say terrible things about you. They might even sue. Then maybe. No. This is my land, Marcus. I built it. I decide what happens to it. And I'm trusting you to keep it whole. His grip on my hand was surprisingly strong. Promise me you won't let them guilt you into giving it up. No matter what they say or do. I promise, Dutch. He died 3 weeks later, on September 15, 2023. He was 87 years old. The funeral was held at the ranch, per his wishes. We buried him on a hilltop overlooking the east pasture, where he used to sit and watch the sunrise. Over 200 people showed up. Ranch hands he'd employed over the decades. Neighbors. Business associates. And family, of course. I gave the eulogy. Talked about Dutch's integrity, his work ethic, his love for the land. I could see Carol crying, real tears, I think. Whatever else she was, she had loved her father. After the service, during the reception, the family dynamics were already shifting. I watched Pete and Carol having intense whispered conversations. Brandon kept trying to pull me aside, but I avoided him. My dad stayed close to me, which I appreciated. Troy, Pete's son, pulled me aside at one point. Marcus, I don't know what Dad is planning, but whatever happens with the estate, I want you to know I'm not part of it. I told him I don't want anything from the ranch. My life is in California. This is Texas drama, and I'm staying out of it. I appreciate that, Troy. Just be careful. I love my dad, but I'm not blind. I know he's got money problems. That was the only warning I got. That evening, Mr. Hendricks announced there'd be a reading of the will in 3 days at his office in town. He invited all the direct descendants, Dad, Pete, Carol, Brandon, Jessica, Troy, and me. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees when he said that. 3 days later, we assembled in Hendricks' law office. It was a small-town practice, nothing fancy, but Hendricks was the best attorney in the county. He'd been Dutch's lawyer for 30 years. Everyone was there except Troy, who'd flown back to California. Jessica sat quietly next to Carol. Brandon wore a suit that probably cost $2,000. Pete kept checking his phone. Dad and I sat together, and I could feel his tension. Hendricks cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time. Dutch left very specific instructions for how this reading should proceed. I'm going to ask that you hold all questions until the end. He began with the small bequest. $50,000 to a local livestock charity. Dutch's truck and personal tools to Jim Martinez, a ranch hand who'd worked for him for 25 years. Some jewelry and personal items to various relatives. Then came the family portions. To my son, Thomas Wright, Hendricks read, I leave the sum of $500,000 from my investment portfolio to be transferred in full within 30 days of probate. Additionally, I leave him the North Pasture acreage, consisting of approximately 80 acres, including all improvements and water access rights on that portion. Dad nodded. His face was calm. He'd probably expected something like this. To my son, Peter Wright, I leave the sum of $500,000 from my investment portfolio to be transferred in full within 30 days of probate. Additionally, I leave him the East property acreage, consisting of approximately 80 acres, including all improvements and mineral rights specifically on that portion. Pete's jaw tightened. I could see him calculating. 80 acres, even with mineral rights, wasn't the whole estate. Not even close. To my daughter, Carol Patterson, I leave the sum of $500,000 from my investment portfolio to be transferred in full within 30 days of probate. Additionally, I leave her the west boundary acreage, consisting of approximately 80 acres, including all improvements thereon. Carol's face went white, then red. She opened her mouth, but Hendricks held up a hand. Please, let me continue. There's an additional clause. He kept reading. To my grandchildren, Brandon Patterson, Jessica Patterson, and Troy Wright, I leave $50,000 each from my investment portfolio to be held in trust and distributed over 5 years. Brandon actually gasped. $50,000 split over 5 years was $10,000 annually. For someone who'd been expecting millions, it was an insult. Then came the big one. And finally, Hendricks continued, his voice steady, to my grandson Marcus Thomas Wright, I leave the following. The room went dead silent. The main ranch house and all contents therein. The remaining ranch acreage consisting of approximately 480 acres, including all water rights, all mineral rights not previously specified, all oil and gas leases, all timber rights, and all improvements. All ranch equipment, including vehicles, tractors, and machinery. All livestock currently on the ranch, including cattle, horses, and other animals. And the remainder of my investment portfolio after the aforementioned distributions, currently valued at approximately $4.2 million. You could have heard a pin drop. Then all hell broke loose. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for next part of the story.